I Found New Life on the Deep Web by u/Rinichiro. Remember when deep web stories were the fad? Every week, you'd find a new tale of someone going too far on the deep web, finding something terrible, and ending up getting attacked for speaking out against it. This story is a bit similar. The difference is, I still love the deep web. Let me explain. I was a senior in high school at that time, and I was definitely no popular kid. My friends were the oddities of the school, the few people who dared to defy the norm. It was them who told me about the deep web, a place on the internet where you are completely unwatched, anonymous, capable of doing whatever you want. And of course, I was intrigued. Most of my friends just used it to buy drugs, but I thought a little bigger. I wanted to know what happened in the darkest parts of the deep web, whether or not my friends were telling the truth when they talked about horrible fetish sites and assassins that you can hire to kill anyone you like. Of course, I wasn't planning on using any of it. I've never been particularly interested in sex, so those kind of sites don't interest me, and there's really nobody I'd like to kill. It was the mystery of it all that fascinated me. Going to these sites would be like peering into a side of the world only a few have ever seen, like a wholly new experience. At that time, I was tired of the monotony of life. I'd get up at the same time every day, go to school, attend the same classes, talk to the same people, go home, play some games, do homework, go to sleep, and then it would repeat. I wondered if other people got tired of that. Anyway, it took me a while to actually dive into the deep web. As fascinated as I was, I'd been warned of what could happen to me. I read the stories I talked about too. Who isn't afraid of being threatened by hackers or stalked by some creeps you piss off online? That kind of shit kept me from actually going on the deep web. Until the day that I manned up and decided that it was time to break the monotony. It was time to delve into the underbelly of the internet, and time to see a world that I had only dreamed of. For the first week or so, it was boring. It was just drug sites and stuff where people expose government secrets or whatever. Nothing as dark as I expected. I don't even do drugs, so that was useless to me, and I wasn't into politics. There wasn't really much that I wasn't into back then, so I was disappointed. The only reason I kept exploring was my sheer desire to experience the world that I thought existed on the deep web. That world was darker than any drug site, the world that had murder, torture, messed up porn for messed up people, and all sorts of nasty shit. I eventually got my wish. Just when my apathy towards the deep web got to its highest point, I found what I was looking for. The site didn't have a name. I thought it was a broken link for a bit since it only led me to a black screen. But right before I could click out, a chat box appeared on the screen. Someone using the name admin typed in the chat box saying, "Congrats, you found the worst place on the internet." I stared at the screen, more bemused than afraid, and it took me a moment to type back. "Cool." That's all I said. What else was there to say? Like, "I'm here to see your finest torture porn?" A moment after, the admin replied, "You want in?" I hesitated. All those horror stories flooding back into my head, but it was too late to chicken out. This was what I came for. Even if I just clicked out the first sign of danger, I had to see what was there. I had to break the monotony. I had to know. And I hastily typed back, not allowing myself to stop. Yeah. The chat box closed, and I was led directly to what looked like a video, with another chat box next to it. There were around 5 other people there, each eagerly waiting for something. The video was in black and white and showed a small room, and the only thing inside was a wooden chair, until after around 5 minutes of waiting, the door to the room opened and a man was shoved inside, blindfolded and naked, save for a pair of black briefs, and he was followed by a woman, this one dressed all in black and her face covered by a mask. In an instant, the chat room went wild. I almost closed the window to spare myself, knowing immediately where this was going. But again, I told myself that this was what I wanted. Maybe not the torture, but the window into the very worst parts of the world. A woman pulled a knife from her pocket and cut off the man's blindfold as she shoved him into the chair. He didn't struggle for a moment, and once his eyes were visible, I could see why. It looked like he had been drugged. Resisting was impossible, and I frowned, glancing to the side. This was messed up. I knew this was messed up. My conscience told me to call the cops or at least to click out, but I forced myself to watch. She turned to the camera, pointing the knife at the man's throat. One of the people in the chat typed, "One of the fingers! Cut off one of his fingers!" I clenched my hands into fists, taking in a sharp breath. Was this really happening? Was I gonna just watch as this guy got mutilated, as a small crowd of people watched in glee? I felt like throwing up, a feeling that only worsened when the woman nodded and turned to the man, grabbing his limp hand and carefully slicing off one of his fingers. Blood spurted from the wound and the man moaned in pain, but he couldn't fight back. Breathing heavily, I hovered my cursor over the axe, planning on getting the hell out of there. But I didn't. The woman looked unimpressed, as if she thought the people in chat could do better. Another person called for a slice of the man's arm, and she complied. He was bleeding heavily now, clearly in deep pain. But these people were sick. They were cheering her on from chat, suggesting new and painful tortures for her to inflict. And eventually, I stopped breathing heavily. I stopped feeling sick. It was starting to grow on me. By the end, the man was on the ground, covered in blood and breathing heavily. I watched this for around half a minute. The people in the chat were starting to die down. They'd inflicted enough pain, and they had their fun. It seemed like things were wrapping up. Funny, I thought, how it was over, just when I was getting into it. I smirked. This was exciting. This was better than any game that I could play. Much better than any class that I could attend. Better than sitting with a group of nobodies pretending like I cared for a goddamn second about them. This was the world I wanted to see. This was darkness. This was the underbelly. This was reality. End him. Slit his throat. I type in chat for the first time. She nodded for one last time, bringing the man to his feet before slowly dragging her blade across his throat, sending more of his blood spreading out. Once it was done, she dropped him, and he fell to the ground limp. He was dead. The people in the chat started complimenting the torturer, talking about how it had been another good time. starting to set a date for the next showing. And on screen, the woman left the room, leaving the corpse behind. Of course, I hastily wrote down the date for the next showing. This was going to be part of my life now. I was going to be part of something bigger. I was going to command these people's death. What a rush. So yeah, I still love the deep web. I'm in college now, and now I'm even more immersed in the deep web. I have seen shit some people would freak out just knowing exists. I've fucked around every sick porn site known to man, and I've finally broken the monotony of life. Inspirational, right? How one high schooler defies the boredom inherent in his life by discovering his true passion. I love the deep web.
I entered an auction house on the dark web and found Myself for Sale by u/Dr. Horrible-26. During my first year of college, I was introduced to the Tor browser by my new roommate, Ricky. Those of you who have been around the internet for long enough know Tor is a browser engine used to help you access the dark web, to which we frequently did. For a barely 20-year-old dude experiencing his first moments of living away from home, being handed a way to access nearly whatever I wanted just from the press of a few keys, felt like being handed absolute freedom. While we mostly used it for accessing pirated games and films, or maybe visiting a banned website, there were times I found myself on the more twisted side of it all. I've honestly seen some pretty fucked up shit that I really didn't want or need to see, other than to satisfy my morbid curiosity of if it would be possible to even reach those places. Well, I mostly regret these deeper dives into the dark web. One such dive might have very well saved my life. It was about 2 a.m. on a Friday, during the end of my third year of college, and Ricky had been spending the night at her cousin's house, leaving me to myself. I'd been scrolling through the web, going through various shady movie sites and running games I didn't technically own, when I got a strange pop-up ad.
One-time auction, limited items, one of a kind. Get now or never again. Don't miss out on these items.
It read in a flashing red and green Comic Sans font. Now, I've gone to a few of these dark web auctions, even participated in a few out of impulse bidding on things that triggered something in my dumb college dude brain. This ranged from things like overly engraved gold handguns you would see Tony Montana strapping, 2 pounds of the finest weed grown in the purest soils of Jamaica, just to give me that little adrenaline rush of, dude, what if I actually get it? Granted, I only ever bid 10, maybe $20 tops. Knowing actually winning any of it would probably land me behind bars. I wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, and would have been busted within minutes of receiving the package. This one would be different, however. I decided I'd check out the auction and clicked on the link before browsing through the bids. At first, it wasn't anything serious, mostly firearms and drugs. Typical black web catalogue. As I moved down the list, the items got more extreme. Much more extreme. The list started with simple low-caliber handguns you could get at Walmart in some states, but quickly changed to sniper rifles and LMGs fit for military elites, till I was eventually being offered small nuclear explosives, claiming to have enough power to level small towns to ash and brimstone. Super strong pot and funny mushrooms quickly turned to advertisements for pounds of Colombian cocaine, to 10-pound boxes of fentanyl pills. Shadiest of all were what I assume are experimental drugs. Black and yellow sludge-like substances, held in test tubes that didn't even have real names. Just things like XT parentheses 1 and B8 plus asterisk RVV1 /dash. Judging by the descriptions, these things fry your brain considering the people selling it explain the effects through mostly incoherent, barely understandable sentences implying they've been indulging in their own supply. I remember one going along the lines of, fun green bubbles, When super cool if eaten, it's like green, green, blue, green bubbles. They fly up, eat up, fly down with the green bubbles. I might be paraphrasing on that, but trust me, it wouldn't have made any more sense than if I did get it spot on. Eventually, I reached what I took to be the hitman and murderer catalogue. Poison brews of ricin and cyanide, claiming to have zero scent or taste. Soundproof sneakers, weapon silencers, fake aliases, passports. People were even selling codes that were apparently instructions on how to get to areas in your location where bodies are most often hidden and never found. There were other codes that were labeled how-to instructional tapes made by professionals on how to get away with various types of crime, even murders. If you didn't want to do the work yourself, you could buy the phone number to a top-class hitman near you who will make sure your job is done effectively. Things only got worse when I scrolled to the next page to see photos of people, some even children, with their names listed underneath. They were advertising human trafficking and giving each of their products a small biography of sorts, as if they were stat cards. It listed everything from addresses to allergies, strengths, weaknesses, even down to daily routine. Now, I've seen these kinds of black room type things and was well aware of how sick people can be on the dark web. But seeing it never gets any less unsettling, especially reading some of the things these bidders wanted to do with their product once they got their hands on them. This unsettlement quickly turned to unimaginable, agonizing fear as I scrolled down to see my own portrait, one taken on my first day of college. I began to panic as I read off my card. Whoever these people were, they knew my name, age, race, height, weight, even down to my small birthmark behind my ear. Not only that, but they seemed to have known my whole life story from birth. My panic only grew wider as I saw there were already 4 bidders, the highest of which bidding almost 15 grand. The sickest part was these bidders left comments. Things like,
"He'd fit well with my collection. I can't wait to have his body. I wish to taste his skin."
Along with a slew of horrible deranged shit they wanted to do with me that I really don't want to repeat. I fell back and began to hyperventilate. It felt like my heart was going to give out and my brain was going to explode, thinking of all the horrible things that may happen to me at the hands of these sick, twisted people who looked to take ownership of my life. Most of the rest of the night was a blur. I remember bidding 20k off the bat to top the list, then periodically bidding, I think, another 3 what felt like every 30 minutes, till I reached almost 40k. After that I must have blacked out because the next thing I remember was waking up curled in a ball under my desk in a puddle of cold sweat. It was still dark out, so the flashing lights coming from my monitor were all too noticeable. I could feel myself shaking in fear as I slowly crawled out from under the desk, before slowly looking at my screen and seeing in large red Comic Sans,
"Congratulations, you win. Please list where you'd like to send your prize. We will send an agent to deliver your package."
I felt an overwhelming amount of relief wash over my body, seeing I had just bought myself. Sure, I ended up putting myself in near debt before I've even finished school, but I'm alive and free. Knowing those vile fucks wouldn't be able to live out their fantasies was enough for me to forget about any possible money problems. I think I even started laughing like a madman for a second. As I entered, "Leave them be. I bought them their freedom so they don't suffer," hoping that'd be enough explanation. And thankfully it was, as I was answered rather quickly with another message.
"Understood. Your product will be removed from all auctions and marked as sold. Thank you for your purchase, Evan."
Reading that caused me to nearly collapse, as if all the stress and tension built up drained from my body, only to quickly return as I reread the message. They knew I just bid on myself. They were still fucking watching. The next couple of months were a living hell of paranoia and anxiety. I tried to explain what I could to Ricky, and he did his best to help calm me down, but it was fruitless. Eventually though, after enough time, I was able to move on from it. More so, I think my mind forced me to block it out. But it's all come back now, thanks to an email I just received from Ricky almost 8 years after that night. Please help. I don't have the money to go up against the highest bidder. I responded as quickly as possible, asking for him to send me his PayPal or something. That was 2 days ago. I haven't gotten a response. I think he lost the auction.
I ordered contact lenses from the dark web. It was the worst decision I ever made. By u/eekpeek. A few months ago, my best friend Jeremy called and asked if he could come over. He told me about this crazy new site of the internet that he had found. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. He was always up to something mischievous though, even as an adult. He still had the enthusiasm of a child when he became excited. Because of that, it was always hard to tell him no. I could tell that this seemed important to him, so I told him to just come over and show me what the hell he was talking about. He came over to my house later the same day. He showed up with a flash drive, and he was so excited, he didn't even take off his shoes. He ran over to my already open laptop that was sitting on my living room table and immediately plugged the flash drive in. He had that obnoxious smile across his face. It was the same smile he made when we were kids. The same taunting grin he made right before we were about to do something that our parents would be furious about. So much for saying hello. You should really knock first. What if I was naked? My voice was playful. Oh, shut up and come sit down. Oh, and I'm sorry for barging in like that, he said just as playfully. Whatever. You're definitely not sorry. I'm going to make us some tea. I'll be right out. I smiled as I walked away. Around 10 minutes later, I came back in with 2 mugs full of freshly brewed tea. I sat the tea down on the table in front of my couch and sat down next to Jeremy. I looked over at my laptop, my eyes immediately fixated on the screen. The flash drive contained a whole different operating system, and I watched my laptop boot up and start running an operating system that I had never even seen before. My eyes then shot their gaze at Jeremy. What the hell is this? Is this going to mess up my computer? You know I can't afford another one if this one breaks. Most importantly, I need it for school. All of my schoolwork is in there. My voice was sharp, but before I could finish talking, he cut me off. You worry too much. Just relax. I tested out on my computer, and everything went fine. Just wait for it to boot up. Your computer will return to normal once I power it down and then remove the flash drive. His voice had a reassuring tone. Yeah, whatever, fine, I said reluctantly. After about 10 more minutes of us just sitting there watching this foreign operating system load, it finally finished. The home screen was a solid shape of blue, and there were only 2 icons. One was a web browser, and the other one was some sort of VPN. In the corner was a search bar, and I tried typing all kinds of words in it, but nothing came up. Eventually, after I was done clicking around, Jeremy took over the controls. He opened up a web browser. It was a search engine that I had never even seen before. Actually, it was a search engine that I never even heard of. And I watched him manically type in random numbers and letters into the search engine. Before I could even ask what he was doing, he hit enter and a Wikipedia page came up. Towards the middle of the page was a list of links. They all had different names. The credit card company, Guns Are Great, and the one-stop shop were the names of some of the links. Most links had extremely illegal titles and definitely led to illegal activities. Some of them were just downright disgusting and disturbing that I'd rather not go into detail about those links. Jeremy quickly identified what he was looking for. It was a link called The Gore Store. He was always into that kind of stuff. I never understood why. Gore was just fascinating to him. I myself could not say the same. It had to have been fake anyways, right? I just wanted to get it over with, so I sat quietly and waited for the page to load. Once it loaded, my screen was filled with obscene images of mutilated bodies. They were videos of different people getting killed in different ways. It was insanely graphic. He showed me 2 30-second clips before I had to run to the bathroom. And I could hear Jeremy's laughter as I viciously gagged over my toilet. When I came out of the bathroom, the Gore page was gone, and he was back on the Wikipedia page. I watched his eyes dart around the screen. It looked like he was trying to find something in particular. And before I could ask what he was doing, he let out, "Aha!" "What is it?" "I'm not sure if this whole dark web thing is for me. Maybe we should just turn it off." Before I could even finish my sentence, he cut me off again. "Look what I found. It's pretty cool. I think you'll actually like it," he said confidently. I reluctantly agreed and sat back down on the couch beside him. The computer cursor was hovered over a link simply named Eyes. I was convinced it was about to be the most nauseating thing in the world, a picture of dangling eyeballs or blood-filled eye sockets. It had to be something along those lines. He could tell that I was unprepared, and he immediately clicked the button after I gave a slight nod of approval. I was not expecting what I saw. They were eyes, all right. Normal eyes. It looked like a business page for selling contacts. It appeared professional, and there was nothing strange about it, except for the fact that the seemingly normal business page was on the dark web. I had to look through their selection and ended up asking Jeremy to buy me a pair. He already had the correct form of currency in some sort of account, and he thought it was funny, of course, and bought them without a second thought. I thanked him, and we talked about what they were going to look like, and we were both excited. After Jeremy left that night, he took the flash drive with him, and he explained that he was going away on a business trip and wouldn't be back for a week or 2. He said that he sent the package directly to my house, but to call him if there were any delivery issues. The estimated arrival date was 3 weeks from that time anyways, and I figured he would be back by then. That way, we could experience unboxing them and me struggling to put them in together. He did find the website and pay for them after all. 2 days later, I was surprised when I opened my front door to get the mail and saw a package at my front door. I quickly got the mail and took the package inside. I remember thinking, these couldn't be the contacts. It was way too early. But I grabbed a box cutter from the kitchen and I started to slice open the package. There they were. The bright green contacts that had a slight blue fade were in that little box. They were beautiful. And I know I told Jeremy that I would wait, but I was too excited. I took them out of the box and soaked them in the contact solution that came with the package. I looked in the mirror at my dark brown eyes while the contact sat in the solution. I smiled at the fact that my eyes were about to be a completely different color, even if it was only temporarily. I always wanted brighter eyes. I had never put in contacts before, so I expected it to be quite tricky for my first try. To my surprise, I put both of them in with quite ease. It's safe to say that I gave myself a pat on the back. I was thoroughly impressed. It was like I had been doing this all of my life. They slid right into place and didn't budge or slide at all. After looking in the mirror for who knows how long, I decided to call Jeremy and tell him about it. He didn't answer. I figured he was probably working and he would eventually call me back. When he didn't pick up, I looked back into the mirror, stunned by my new eye color, and I started taking pictures to update my social platforms. We can say my self-esteem skyrocketed. When I was done obsessing over my new contacts, I decided that I should probably make dinner. I lived by myself and I always made way too much food. I'd used the leftovers for lunch, so it never really went to waste. That night, I decided to make a whole lasagna. It was one of my favorite meals and I figured that I could give some to my elderly neighbor as well. I put a pot of water on the stove to bring it to a boil, and as I was pulling out the noodles, something caught my eye. It was like a quick shadow flew by my peripheral vision. I stopped and looked around, but I saw nothing. I remember thinking it was strange, but not uncommon. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. I finished prepping and I lined the cooked noodles on a sheet of aluminum foil. I opened up a package of raw meat to cook in an already hot pan, and as I went to open the meat, I glanced over at the noodles, and this time, I was looking straight at them, and a wave of horror washed over my face. The noodles had turned into maggots. They were squirming all over the aluminum foil, and I watched as some of them wiggled themselves off of the counter. Each time one hit the ground, I flinched, and they were big. They were about as big as the top part of a pointer finger. I grabbed the broom and the garbage can, and I swept them all into the garbage. I took it outside to the garbage bin immediately. After that, I had completely lost my appetite. I decided that I needed to take a bath to try to calm down and recollect my thoughts. I made some tea, lit some candles, and filled the bathtub. I slowly got into the bath as the hot water touched my skin. It was quiet and peaceful. I finally had the time to think. I closed my eyes and let my head rest against the back of the tub. What just happened? I'm definitely not seeing things. Those maggots were real. How in the world did my freshly boiled noodles turn into maggots? It doesn't make any sense. I whispered my thoughts aloud. When I opened my eyes to gaze at the relaxing setup that I had put together, I jumped out of the water. The bath water was a deep shade of red now, and every candle I had lit had went out. I quickly wrapped myself in a towel and turned the main light on. The candles weren't lit, but the water was clear again. I didn't care. I wasn't going back in there. I dried myself off and put on fresh clothes. I went back into the bathroom to brush my teeth and hair before bed. I turned on the sink and grabbed my toothbrush. But right before I start brushing my teeth, I looked up into the mirror and I felt a knot form in my stomach. I was holding the toothbrush in my mouth, but my reflection wasn't. I watched my reflection sway back and forth, and the closer I leaned in, the farther my reflection would back up. It giggled, as I watched my own reflection tear out my eyeballs. My reflection's eyes were dangling so low that they touched its mouth. It licked one of the eyeballs, and one of the contacts flipped on its tongue. It started to chew it like it was food. Each chew sounded like broken pieces of plastic. Watching blood start to fall from my reflection's eyes, I couldn't take it anymore. I washed out my mouth and I ran back into my bedroom. I sat down at my vanity and tried to take out the contacts without looking into the mirror. I thought they would be easy to remove since they were so easy to put in. I was wrong. No matter what I did, they wouldn't budge. Not even a little bit. I tried pinching it, moving it, pushing and sliding it. Nothing. After 30 minutes of nothing but severely irritating my eye, I gave up. I straightened my neck from my bent-over position, and I looked in my vanity mirror. My reflection was laughing at me. I covered all the mirrors in my house until I could figure out some way to get these things out of my eyes. They were a pretty natural color, so if I went out in public, nobody would even notice that I had contacts stuck in my eyes. I was also skeptical to call a doctor at that time, considering I received these contacts from the dark web. I decided to try and rationalize things. I realized I sure didn't want to sleep with them in, so I'd have to stay awake as long as possible until I found a solution. I went into my living room to watch TV. It was the only place in my house where I couldn't see myself in some way. And my house looked slightly abandoned. I had blankets draped over anything that could cause a reflection. I leaned forward to grab the remote which had fallen on the floor, and upon picking it up, I felt a sharp pain throughout my entire hand. I immediately dropped the remote and looked at my aching palm. Every inch of my hand was riddled in cuts. I watched the blood drip from my hand and onto the floor. I looked down to find the remote on the ground still. The button stuck out and came to a sharp point. They were sharper than any newly opened razor. I kicked the remote as hard as I could, and I heard it crash against the wall and hit the floor. With my head and hands, I heard the television turn on. It was playing a show that I couldn't recognize. I lifted my head and looked towards the television. It was me. I was on my own television. The quality was grainy, but I could make out what was happening. The television showed me walking across the street from the local grocery store. On my way across the road, a huge truck came at full speed, and in a blink of an eye, the truck hit me, and I watched my lifeless body drag against the sidewalk. Then it turned back off. I didn't know what to do. I was scrambling around, trying to figure something out. I ended up calling Jeremy. He seemed a bit confused, and honestly, it didn't even sound like he believed me. It's like he thought that I was joking around, and he ended up just hanging up on me, thinking that I was pranking him. When I hung up my phone, I slammed it down on the hallway floor. I have been sitting there ever since the television situation. Tears filled my eyes as I heard my phone vibrate against the wooden floor. I picked up my phone and saw it was a text message from an unknown number.
"Go outside,"
is all it read. I tried calling the number back. Of course, that didn't work, considering there was no number to begin with. The caller ID just said, unknown. At this point, I was trying everything. What more did I have to lose? I walked past my kitchen and glanced over at a bowl of fruit that I kept on the counter. They were all black and rotten. I didn't stop though. I just wanted to make it to my front door. I didn't plan on actually fully going outside, but a peek wouldn't hurt. At least, that's what I thought. And before I could put my hand on the doorknob, someone started knocking.
Package delivery.
The voice was deep and foreign. I opened up my door just a tad, and there stood a delivery man. His eyes were wide, really wide. They looked dry, like he hadn't blinked in hours. He had slash wounds across his entire face and down his neck, and he was incredibly lanky and tall. He reached out his arm to hand me the package, and I realized he was missing 6 fingers. The wounds looked incredibly fresh, and blood soiled the entire box. "Just leave it there, I'll get it," I said quickly. I slammed the door in his face and locked every single door in my house that led to the outside. Once I was sure he was gone, I quickly grabbed the package and pulled it in my house. Everything around me was slowly decaying, even the people outside. I eventually made my way back to my room. My stairs were now littered with nails sticking directly upwards. I tried to avoid as many as I could, but I still stabbed the bottom of my feet multiple times. There were countless bloody holes in my feet, and I left a crimson trail wherever I walked. I walked into the bathroom that was connected to the bedroom once more. I pulled off the cover and looked at myself again. This time, my reflection was still laughing, but pieces of flesh dangled from different areas of my face. My neck was snapped, and I had a noose around my neck. My tongue salivated black-looking tar, and my eyes were now completely hollowed out. I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm afraid of going to sleep. What if I wake up and my entire house is embedded in barbed wire? What if my floor is completely made out of shards of glass? What if everything around me turns into an ultimate death trap? I am absolutely terrified. I'm not taking any chances, especially since I brought the box inside and I ended up opening it. There was another box inside, and this box was slightly cleaner, but had a message scratched along the top. It was barely legible, but it read,
Open to find out when your untimely demise will fall upon you. Clocks ticking.
Again, I had figured that I had nothing to lose, so I opened the second box. And this time, the box contained a handwritten note.
Not all eyes are meant to be a prize. The context you contain will show the other side. You can live with this vision or choose your demise. I left you a gift. Now, you can decide.
I've been sitting here for hours now, and all my food is maggot infested and moldy. I need to go to the grocery store, but I kept looking at the gift that sat below the note. I never really thought that this would be an appropriate gift for anyone, but I can't help but gaze at this already tied noose. I knew going on the dark web was a bad idea. Why I Quit My Job on the Dark Web. Story by u/forget_December. I used to work on the dark web. I won't get into how I came into this line of work. My job is simply consisted of tracking down people that I was paid to find, kidnapping them, and bringing them to a specific location. I never concerned myself with what would have happened to those people afterwards, but from what I understood, they would usually be put into the slave trade or held for ransom. And after years of doing this kind of work, I eventually became desensitized to it. To me, it was just another day at the office. The only difference was that this paid much better. I should also point out that I didn't work alone. I had a partner that helped me. For the sake of this story, I'll call him Sam. Sam and I met through the dark web forums about 3 months after I started my work. He was much more experienced in kidnapping people from the dark web than I was, having done it for several years, but as he was getting older, he realized the job was too difficult to do on his own anymore. And after talking for a while, we eventually agreed to work together. I would help him perform the tasks that were more difficult for him to do due to his age, and he would guide me along, as well as bring me along on more difficult, higher-paying jobs to reduce the risk of me screwing them up. After meeting, we quickly realized we were a good match. It only took a few weeks to get into a groove. We'd be contacted by our employers via the forums, given a target, as well as any other important information that would be crucial for the task. Sam and I would then drive his van to the location to scope it out. We'd spend whatever time we had getting any information that our employer left out, such as schedules and patterns. Then, we would decide on a date, time, and location, then secure our target and bring them to a specified drop point given to us by our employer. We would be paid and then move on to the next job. We did our job like clockwork. As horrible of a job it was, we were really good at it. We eventually got to the point where we could secure a target within a matter of days. We soon were able to live comfortably. Of course, we weren't stupid enough to grow complacent. After all, the dark web is a dangerous place for anyone who isn't careful. We were living smoothly, not really caring about the people we were hurting to do so. All we cared about was our fat wallets and nice homes. But then one day, everything came crashing down around us. Sam and I had been sent a job by an unnamed employer. They had instructed us to secure a 19-year-old male who lived in a wealthy neighborhood. This wasn't very abnormal for us. Plenty of previous employers sent us to secure wealthy targets, usually to ransom off. What was abnormal were the set of instructions that they had given us. They told us the target had no security system in his home, but we were not to take this for granted. We were to practice extreme caution and vigilance when securing the target, and we were to consider him extremely dangerous. Finally, the strangest instruction they gave us was that we were to administer carfentanil or a similar drug via tranquilizer darts before securing. It wasn't the fact that our employer wanted us to tranquilize our target that was strange. We had done it to plenty of previous targets before. What was strange was that they specifically requested that we use carfentanil. That was the type of tranquilizer that they used on elephants. Even a single dart of this stuff would be enough to kill a human. Let me make it clear that we were not hitmen. Sam and I have never killed anyone in our lives before or after taking on this line of work. We knew there was no way we could use this stuff to take our target alive. We just assumed that our employer didn't really know much about tranquilizers and just wanted to sound smart by including a specific kind. I really wish that we had just listened to their instructions. We started studying our target the day after we received our instructions. The boy was a recluse to say the least. From what we could tell, He lived in his parents' house and they were almost never home. He spent pretty much every day indoors, doing whatever he wanted to pass the time. Reading, playing video games, watching TV, typical teenager stuff. And for the life of us, Sam and I couldn't find a single reason to consider this kid intimidating, let alone dangerous. He seemed to live an extremely sheltered life and had more than likely never been in a fight before. But we had a job to do, and we had to follow the rules that we were given the best we could. On the night that we went to extract, we parked our van just outside the kid's home. Nobody else in the neighborhood was awake, so it would be relatively simple to pull him out once we got him. Sam sat up front, while I laid in the back of the van, aiming the tranquilizer rifle through the back doors. The way the van was parked gave me a perfect vantage point to the kid's house. Also, in case you were wondering, I wasn't using carfentanil, opting to use a weaker drug that wouldn't kill a human being. I wasn't concerned about our employer being upset their instructions were followed exactly, unless they were planning on testing the kid's blood when they got him. There wasn't any way they would know. After 30 minutes of waiting, the kid appeared in the kitchen window. We weren't too far away, so the amount of detail that I could see through was very high. He had a mop of wavy blonde hair, a splash of freckles on his nose and cheeks, and piercing emerald green eyes. He was pouring himself a glass of water when I tagged him. His reaction was surprisingly tame. He jumped from surprise as the dart entered his neck. He didn't scream, and when he pulled it out, he didn't look scared or confused. If anything, he looked annoyed, as if he had just swatted a mosquito that had landed on him. Then he turned his head and looked right at me. I had been doing this job for about 4 years at this point, and I had seen some freaky shit. Sure, most of it was when I was browsing the dark web, but nevertheless, there was almost nothing that scared me. The look this kid gave me freaked me out. It's hard to describe exactly what his expression was as his eyes burned into me. But the best way that I could describe it was an expression that said, "I dare you to come for me. You won't like what will happen if you do." After that, the kid turned off the kitchen light and walked out of view. The van shook as Sam opened the door and hopped out, walking around to me. He had a body bag in one hand and a flashlight in the other. "All right, partner, you ready to do this?" he said calmly. I don't know if he saw the kid's expression or not, but if he did, he wasn't showing it. Yeah, let's go," I said, packing away the rifle and grabbing my own flashlight. "Christ, this is a nice house," Sam said absent-mindedly. "This is one lucky kid. I know it's not what we normally do, but maybe we could rob the place while we're here, yeah?" I didn't respond as we walked towards the house. I picked the lock to the back door and we stepped in quietly. All the lights were off and the place was dead silent. First, we went to the kitchen. We both knew the kid probably wouldn't be there. Tranquilizers take a while to kick in, and if he had walked away after getting tagged, he'd probably be somewhere else in the house. And we were right. The kitchen was empty, without any dishes or food on the counters, save for the half-full glass of water. We continued searching the house, but it became quickly apparent that something was wrong. No matter how hard we looked, we couldn't find the kid anywhere. He should have fallen unconscious by now, the tranquilizer having long since taken effect, but he was nowhere to be seen. Are you sure you hit the damn kid? Sam hissed at me after several minutes of fruitless searching. I swear, if you screw up this job because of crappy aim, I'm gonna kill you. I know I hit him, I snapped. I even saw him pull the dart out. Well then where the hell is he? Sam asked. He couldn't have gotten far not with a tranquilizer in him. Our argument was cut short by a noise coming from the other side of the house. It sounded like multiple thuds in quick succession, like someone was loudly stomping around. The noise continued for a minute, moving around the house before finally stopping. Sam and I quickly split up to investigate. We weren't sure about where the noise was coming from, and we didn't want to risk our target getting away. I walked back through the kitchen to the living room, and I was about to move on to the next room when something caught my eye. On the floor was a pile of fabric. When I looked closer, I found that it was a pile of clothes. I recognized it as the clothes the kid was wearing. By the looks of it, he had stripped completely naked and left his clothes here. I had no idea why he did this. Stripping naked didn't really give you a tactical advantage when trying to escape a kidnapping. At least, not one that I could think of. Taking off your shoes could make your footsteps quieter, but taking off all your clothes wasn't really necessary. I was trying to think of a good reason for the kid stripping when my thoughts were interrupted by a blood-curdling scream coming from the other end of the house, and I instantly recognized the voice of Sam. I ran as fast as I could to where the scream came from, and when I got there, Sam was laying on the ground in the hallway. From where I was standing, I couldn't see any more than his upper torso, arms, and head. He was clinging to the wall for dear life, while something in the hallway that I couldn't see pulled and wrenched at his legs. Whatever it was strong and determined to pull Sam loose. I bolted forward, desperately trying to help my partner get free. I didn't even make it halfway before Sam lost his grip and was pulled out of sight. He was screaming and crying, begging me to save him, and when I rounded the corner, whatever had him was pulling him through the basement door. I only saw Sam for a split second before he was pulled down the stairs to the basement. I ran to the door, flicking the light switch on. Nothing happened. Someone had shut off the power to the house. I was caught between praying that this thing was alone and praying that it wasn't. If it was alone, that meant that we wouldn't have to deal with anybody or anything else. But that would also mean that it was smart enough to know to shut off the power in order to get the upper hand. I was shaken from my thoughts by the realization that Sam had stopped screaming. I seriously considered making a break for it and leaving him behind. It was easy to assume that he was dead. But even horrible people can make friends, and as much as I wanted to deny it, I had formed a bond with Sam over the years working with him, and I couldn't bring myself to leave him behind. So, scolding myself for being stupid, I made my way down the stairs. When I got to the bottom, I expected the basement to be silent, but instead, I heard a distinct crunching noise coming from the other end of the room. I tried to discern what the noise was by the sound alone, but the adrenaline pumping through me made it hard to focus. With trembling hands, I clicked on my flashlight and aimed it towards the noise. And I spent every day wishing that I had never done that. A gangly creature was hanging from an exposed bar jutting from the ceiling of the basement. It appeared human, but only barely. Its arms were too long, with nails like claws, and its legs and feet had too many joints, which allowed it to hang upside down from the ceiling like a bat. It seemed to have skin that didn't fit its own skeleton, with some areas being stretched thin while others were bunched up. As for the crunching noise, I found out quickly where it came from. Sam hung limply from the creature's grip. He was clearly dead, with large chunks of flesh missing. Every few moments, the creature would pull Sam's body up towards its mouth and take a large bite out of him, tearing the flesh away and chewing loudly. It didn't seem to be picky either. It ate whatever part of its mouth found, including bone. And once it realized it had a flashlight trained on it, it stopped eating Sam's corpse and looked up at me. Its face was a bloody mess. The features of its face were twisted horribly. Its jaw was so wide open, I thought it was disconnected from its skull, and its eyes lacked any sense of humanity. This thing was a monster, and I knew that it would kill me without hesitation if it got the chance. I was frozen by fear, staring at this thing when recognition suddenly struck me. The monster had horrifying creatures, but the blonde hair, freckles, and green eyes made everything fall into place. This thing was our target. It was the kid that we had been sent here to capture. His features may have been mangled and warped, but there was no denying that this monstrosity was him. I understood why the tranquilizer didn't work, and why our employer instructed us to use the drugs they wanted. Why they would want this thing alive is beyond me. I would sleep much better at night if I knew this thing was in a deep, deep grave. After what seemed like hours of unbroken eye contact, the monster screeched at me. That was enough to send me sprinting up the stairs, and I didn't stop running, didn't turn around to see if the thing was chasing me. I kept running until I got to the van, jumped in the driver's seat, and peeled off into the street. I went several miles over the speed limit, but I didn't care. I wouldn't feel safe until I was miles away from that beast. After skipping town, I emptied my savings accounts and liquidized everything I owned. After that, I went through an extensive process to erase any lingering trails. I changed my name, underwent plastic surgery, and whatever little presence that I had on the web, I thoroughly scrubbed clean. Any evidence of the man I was before was completely gone by the time that I finished. As far as anyone was concerned, I never existed until 2 months ago. I had made a promise to myself to never bring up what I saw, to bury the past as deep as it would go, but I have been plagued by nightmares ever since seeing that monster. And I thought that maybe if I warned the world of its existence, my conscience might be alleviated. I can't go into detail about where the beast is located. It's better for everyone if that is kept a secret. As for whoever it was that wanted to capture the beast, I haven't heard from them since. In all honesty, I'm actually glad that we didn't succeed in capturing it. I don't want to find out what their plans for the monster were when they got it. So, take this as a warning. People say that the dark web is full of monsters. I learned the hard way that sometimes that could be taken literally.
The dark web is not what you think it is, by user BadBunny9191. Alright, so check this out. I don't even know where to start. I can hardly think straight. I've lost all my appetite. I can't sleep, not with what I know now. I hope that anyone who sees this can learn from my mistake before it's too late. What started as a mere curiosity has ruined my life. I'm a computer science major and have loved computers from a very young age. The ability to create such powerful programs and interfaces through the mere utilization of code has always amazed and fascinated me. It's 8 p.m. I'm at the local high school. I teach an after-school intro to programming class every weekday. It's not a bad job. $15 an hour isn't too shabby, and most of the students who take my class are reasonably intelligent and disciplined. As my class was coming to a close, one of my students motioned for me to come over. He said, "Sir, what's this?" I glanced at his screen as he moved his mouse over to an application saved to his desktop entitled Tor. I said, "It's just a web browser like Windows or Chrome, except it allows the user to search the web anonymously, and it's highly encrypted, meaning it's nearly impossible to trace or record any internet activity." He stared hard at the application for a moment, like he was pondering something. He said, "So nothing I do on Tor can be traced back to me. Could I access the deep web on something like this?" he asked. "I suppose you could access almost anything on it," I said frankly, before walking back to the front of the class. "Thank you for your time today, class. I hope you all learned something new about using JavaScript on web platforms. Tomorrow, I look forward to seeing all of your completed HTML projects. Enjoy your evening. Class is dismissed." Like every other day, I drove straight home. I watched Netflix for an hour, then I went straight to bed. Needless to say, I didn't have the greatest social life. The next day is when things started to get weird. When I showed up to class 15 minutes early to prepare, I found that same boy sitting outside, waiting. I said, "What are you doing here so early?" I was genuinely perplexed. He looked me straight in the eye, and I felt immediately that something was wrong. He said, There's something that I need to show you." I felt uneasy and confused. This behavior wasn't like him. He hardly ever talked in class, with the exception of an occasional question, much less showed any emotion. He said, "I downloaded Tor on my computer last night after I got home. I was curious and I just wanted to check it out. But when I woke up this morning, I noticed that I'd received several anonymous messages." He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and then he handed it to me. My eyes immediately widened. "Stop now. We know who you are. We know all about you. Stop what you are doing. This is your only warning. We're watching you." There was no phone number attached. It just said private caller. I said it was probably just a prank text. "Do you think this could be related to me downloading Tor?" he asked nervously. I said, "Nah, I doubt it. The shadiest stuff that ever happens here is the buying and selling of illegal weapons, drugs, stuff like that. I've never heard of anyone getting stalked from just using it. Plus, there's no way they could get your phone number, especially when you're using an encrypted browser," I said, trying my best to sound confident. But I stopped and I asked him, "Wait, about what time did you use Tor last night?" He said it was like 9:30, right before he went to bed. And then I asked, "What time did you get those texts?" 9:41, he said, blinking slowly. "Well, I'm not gonna lie, that's really weird. Just don't use Tor tonight and then see what happens." He says, "I won't. I definitely won't. Thank you for your reassurance." He smiled genuinely and appeared to have finally calmed down. "Have a seat wherever you'd like. Class will start shortly," I said as his classmates began to fill up the classroom. The rest of the day went more or less as usual. The students presented the websites that they had created, and I assessed and critiqued them. Class ended. I went straight home as I did every other day. This night, however, I didn't watch Netflix. I downloaded Tor. I felt that I had no other choice. I had to get to the bottom of this. It was my moral duty. If anyone was qualified to research this browser, I was. I knew everything from how to encrypt my VPN from any server to computer hacking and everything in between. Download complete, my screen read. Right before I could dive in, I felt a wave of uneasiness just hit me. As much as I hated to admit it, what happened to my student was really creepy, especially the fact that his usage of Tor and the appearance of those weird messages occurred in just a matter of minutes. I'll hold off until tomorrow, I reasoned, just to be sure. He wasn't at class the next day, or the next. I learned from the local news that he had gone missing, and he's yet to be found. It cannot be a coincidence anymore. It must be related to Tor. Before I could contact the authorities, I received a text message. It said, "We know what you know. Say a word and you're next. We are watching you."
I found out what happened to my friend on the dark web. Story by u/TheRealDeltaX. There used to be a small YouTube channel called Sam's Online Food Review. It was run by my best friend Sam Ryder. A channel full of videos that consisted of Sam eating and reviewing food and drinks before a camera. His channel garnered around 10,000 subscribers, which, although wasn't huge, it was big enough for Sam to be dedicated to it. I can recall numerous times of sitting in the passenger seat of his car, staying out of his shot, as moments prior he announced that he wanted to video himself trying something that he picked up in the store, only moving after he signed off with his signature thumbs up or down and his catchphrase, "I like it," or "I loathe it." He was liked for his very friendly attitude and happy all-around good guy persona. He was well received by his audience. Rarely were there any hate comments, and when there was, Sam would shrug them off and keep smiling. Sam was always smiling. Sam's Online Food Review went dark 7 months ago. No warning, no notice, just deactivated. I didn't hear or see from Sam despite numerous phone calls and house visits to no avail. And 6 days after his channel was deleted, I called the police to do a welfare check on Sam. I was worried that he had fallen ill or hurt himself, and the police made entry into his property and found nothing, and Sam was declared a missing person. A week after Sam was declared missing, a dog walker discovered a horrifically mutilated corpse on a railway line. The body had severe lacerations all around the head, arms, chest, and legs, and was almost cut in two across the waist. The decomposing internal organs splayed out of the gruesome V-shaped cut, and the autopsy report noted that although no direct cause of death could be confirmed, it was likely the large slit in the throat that brought on death. The autopsy also turned up questionable findings, including the body missing its stomach and heart, long strips of flesh removed off the chest, arms, and lower back, and that the body was exsanguinated. The scene wasn't remarkably bloody, yet the body was almost completely drained of blood. 2 weeks later, the police had identified the deceased. Despite the damage that had occurred to the corpse, the teeth were intact enough to get a viable reference for dental records. My worst fears for Sam were realized. It was him. The police investigated but could not find forensic evidence of any other person being on the scene. They eventually came to the conclusion that he was hit by a passing freight train. The lacerations and disembowelment attributed to being dragged under, and the missing organs explained away by being eaten by wildlife, a fox maybe. Sam's mother decided that it was best to cremate what remained of her only son. I stood next to her as the beach coffin was pulled into the large furnace, and as the door closed and the gas jets ignited with a whoosh, she broke down into tears, and so did I. I stood there sobbing for the entire 90 minutes it took for one of the people that I grew up with and shared so many memories with was vaporized. I mourned my friend and done my best to move on, and it was going well. I got distracted, got a new job, started dating a girl that I met through my work, and a few months passed, and even though I miss Sam, things were going well. Right up to the point where I was browsing Reddit at 3 a.m. that I received a Facebook message from the account of my dead friend. I froze, seeing his profile picture in the messenger bubble, a picture taken during good times. Sam's wide smile plastered on his face, and I felt a sudden chill. A profound sense of fear enveloped me. You know, the fear that makes you cold and your limbs ache as the slow drip of adrenaline spreads throughout your body. With dread, I opened the message. It was a link to a file-sharing website, and I stared at the seemingly random amalgamation of numbers and letters that made up the URL. My head racing through what the hell was on the other side of the link, and more importantly, why did my dead friend send me it? My hand, seemingly on autopilot, brought the cursor above the link. With my gut instinct screaming no, I clicked on the link. Before my finger had lifted from the click, I immediately regretted what I just did. Chrome opened a new tab to the website. The screen was gray, apart from a black rectangle in the middle of the page, which had a play button over it. I stared at it, unwilling to click. What I was scared of, I did not know. And around 10 seconds had passed. Then the screen refreshed. Instead of the play button, the rectangle had words auto-playing in 5 seconds in bright white on it. And I watched as the numbers count down, trying to understand what was going on. An abrupt buzzing noise made me jump. The video began to play, and the camera was pointed at what appeared to be a grimy white tiled surface. I could hear the sound of muffled whimpering, followed by footsteps of someone approaching the camera. There was some slight rustling noises as the camera was adjusted, and the screen blurred out as the camera was turned. And when the camera came back into focus, I let out a choked gasp. In the middle of a white tiled room, Sam lay on his back on a stainless steel table, his eyes wide in pure, unfiltered terror. The light of a single bulb hanging over the table reflected off the sheen of sweat that coated his forehead. His naked chest rising and falling rapidly in panic. He looked into the camera and attempted to yell, the noise muffled by a tight cloth gag that was bound around his head. His hands were also bound together tightly with duct tape, and I stared at the screen, feeling increasingly sick. My brain failing to grasp what was going on before I could even comprehend what was happening. The sound of Sam squirming and whimpering was interrupted by a high-pitched, "Welcome to Sam's online food review. Today, we have a special treat." The mocking tone came behind the camera. Sam's panic increased. He started jerking his body, trying to free his hands. Then the voice continued. "Today, we will try what is considered a delicacy in many countries, although usually a forbidden one, that is. The camera zoomed out slightly, and a man appeared in the frame, standing in front of Sam. He was dressed in a white coat with a red striped apron on. He wore a butcher's hat and a cloth-faced mask. In his rubber-gloved hands, he held a large red-handled butcher's scimitar, and in the other, he held a sharpening rod. The man started running the knife up and down the blade in a smooth fashion, the steel on steel making a smooth noise. Sam's panic-muffled yells growing stronger. The man placed down the sharpening rod and walked around the table. Sam turned his head and started what sounded like desperate pleading with the man. "Poor little lamb," the man cooed. "It won't hurt long, and you'll be delicious." Even from here, I could see the tears that filled my friend's eyes, and as he struggled, the man rolled Sam onto his front and pulled his head over the edge of the table. The man then walked out of the shot and returned with a metal bucket. He placed it on the floor below Sam's head, and in a swift motion, he grabbed a tuft of Sam's hair and lifted his head and started slitting his throat. Crimson burst from his neck and splashed over the bucket and onto the floor, my friend's body jerking uncontrollably as blood spewed out of his neck like a volcanic eruption. And as I watched this happen, I threw up. I fell out of my chair in horror, and I pulled myself away, not able to see anymore. I fell again by the door, the speakers of my computer loud enough to hear what sounded like slicing and grunting. I lay curled up in the corner, sobbing amidst the panic attack, and the minutes feeling like hours, and when the sound stopped, I shakily got up and walked to my computer, avoiding the pool of sick on the floor. I forced myself to look at the screen. The page had closed, and Chrome displayed the Reddit screen. The Facebook tab had one notification. I didn't want to click it, but I willed myself to. It was a message from Sam. "I like it." I found a very different doctor in the dark web. Story by u/Oren Cutuli. In retrospect, it's kinda ironic that my love for the science I chose would be my predicament. I mean, it looks unfair that my curiosity and thirst for knowledge would lead me in such a shady path. The only thing I ever wanted was to be better at my job. I am a medicine student. For as long as I can remember myself, I was fascinated by the human body. No matter how bad we treat it sometimes, it is nothing short of perfection. The structure and function of the organs, the delicate high-functioning brain, the blue snake-like veins carrying the blood into the heart to be cleaned and recycled. Simply magnificent. It was a simple choice for me. I wanted to study more about the body, learn all the details it hides, and sometimes rectify it. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't really enjoy studying to get to medicine school. Most of the time, it was a tedious process of learning about irrelevant topics that I really didn't care about, but I managed to pull through and get into the university. There, I developed very mixed feelings. Although some lectures were diving into the secrets of what we were supposed to be learning about, most were simply stuff read from a PDF presentation by a semi-bored professor. The kind of knowledge you could acquire by reading some science magazines. Magazines that I had already read. So, most of the times, I went to the campus feeling indifferent, secretly hoping that I could get to learn something amazing like perhaps a new fun fact in the anatomy class. But that was rare. I can't say I have many friends. Come to think of it, I don't think I have any. I am friendly with all of my classmates and peers, but we really don't have anything else in common, other that we study the same subject. They didn't study the way I did. Most of them valued the prestige and paycheck that comes with being a doctor. Some truly wanted to help others in times of sickness. But no one wanted to actually learn, not the way I did. They consumed themselves in parties, drugs, and sex with each other, while I went the extra mile and studied something more than the given material every night, just to tame my lust for knowledge. I remember the day Jonathan approached me in the campus cafeteria. It was in a break between some classes that we both participated. He sat opposite to me and asked me how I was doing. We chatted a bit about everything and nothing, and mostly regarding some projects that we were working as homework at that time. I liked this guy. Jonathan wasn't the best student or the most intriguing person, but I knew he also truly loved medicine and tried his best to learn more than what the university spoon-fed us. I respected him for that, so it came as a pleasant surprise when he introduced me to a new idea. "Hey man," he said, "I know that you feel bored here. I sort of get it too sometimes." Boy, was he right. "I have found a man that really knows his stuff," he continued, and then more hesitantly. "There is a link to the dark web of a very good doctor. His methods are a bit unconventional, so he can't broadcast for the normies, but he is really skillful. I mean, at least his teaching has helped me a lot with my exams." He laughed at this, and I thought about it for a while before answering. "Sure," I said. "Let's see what this mysterious doctor has to offer." By then, I had read many books and articles already, and I would give anything to see something fresh. Jonathan smiled and gave me a note with an alleged link. "Nice, bro. If you need any help with this dark web thing, give me a call. My phone is also on that note. Would be cool to chill out in the doctor's chat room and learn from him." I didn't have to call him. I politely said goodbye as he left and resumed with my lunch. But I was curious now. I am by no means a computer guy, but I can work my way through some stuff. So, I won't bore you with the details of how I got to the site. Most of you here are familiar with this kind of stories anyway. The path is simple. You get the appropriate software to enable you to go into the deep web, and then you start searching. You have to be very specific for what you are looking for. Otherwise, you'll get lost in a mountain of cyber junk. And specific I was. I got to the link I wanted relatively fast. It was a site called Anatomy 102. It had a plain gray template and the classical ancient Greek symbol of medicine as a logo. A snake wrapping itself around a rod, although it was a little different than the usual one. The snake looked like it was biting on something, and that something sort of resembled a human skull. That looked a little peculiar. There was a camera focused on an empty white room and also a chat room. The chat room had around 50 people active, casually talking about various medicine specializations, speculating what they would learn about today. And around 10 minutes later, 2 people appeared in the room, both wearing the typical operation room uniforms, dragging a big table of surgery tools with them. One of them disappeared from the screen, and the other stood in front of the camera still wearing his mask.
Hello, my dear audience. It brings me great pleasure to see many of you here today. This is a place of learning and understanding, so I would advise all of you to pay attention and observe all the details.
I liked this intro. A true professor.
For all those who happen to be new here, let me introduce myself. I am going by the name of Dr. Mason here, but you can just address me as Doctor in the chat. Every 2 weeks we gather around here to discuss something about anatomy and how it works in practical ways.
As he finished his words, the second guy got in the frame again, this time pushing a surgery table before him. The table was full. I guess it had a dead body or a sleeping person on it. By that time, the count of the chat room read 250 online people. The other guy, also wearing a mask, took the sheet that was covering the body on the bed to reveal something that I was not prepared for. A living human, fully awake, muffled and tied on the bed with leather straps. He was a middle-aged with brown hair and very scared look in his eyes. The man was sweaty and in obvious distress, but he couldn't do much. He was tied like a piece of meat as he was.
As you may know, the doctor continued, the digestive system is one of the most important systems in the human body. It is the source of all the energy input and output of animals, and today, we'll give it a closer look.
The chat box was filled with lots of expressions of happiness, as people seemed to be content with the idea of the lesson. I, for once, felt nervous. I could never expect what followed next. The doctor started operating the man on the bed without using any anesthesia. He cut open an incision in his belly while the man's screams were drowned behind the muffler. After that, he started taking parts of the victim's intestines out and showing them on the camera, talking in detail about everything, and also applied pressure at certain points to demonstrate what he was talking about, generating huge amounts of pain for the helpless victim. During the whole process, he showed no hint of emotion. The chat was filled with questions, most of which he replied to, same way our professors talked to us back in uni. He paid extra attention to those who wanted him to experiment on the limitations of the victim. He noted that the people asking those questions had true motivation to learn and will progress in their career. After that statement, he followed through with the suggestions given to him. Blood had started to make a puddle on the floor. Every now and then the victim would faint by the sheer pain he felt, but the doctor's helper would wake him up every time. The doctor insisted that it is important for the patient to have his senses in order for us to take notes of his reactions. I was shocked, but I couldn't look away. Same thing when you see a gruesome accident on the street, and you know that if you check to see what happened, you'll feel the urge to throw up, but you still turn your head and look, your eyes thirsty for the odd and the gore. The procedure was getting more and more extreme. The incision was even bigger now, and the doctor was explaining the reflexes of the stomach while holding the actual man's organ on his hand. He applied pressure to it, and a wave of gastric fluids went through the now crying man's esophagus, choking him as he was lying face up. It didn't last much longer after this. The victim went unconscious, and it seems that even the helper couldn't bring him up anymore. After a few tries, the helper looked at the doctor and nodded. The doctor then returned his face to the camera.
All right, class. That's all I had to talk about today. Any questions?
A few messages appeared on the chat box, and he selectively answered some of them.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we had for today's class,
he said, and then continued.
Okay, who would like to volunteer for the next lesson?
The chat was suddenly silent.
Oh, come on, such a shy audience. You'll never become true scientists if you are afraid to take risk. But anyhow, most of you know the procedure. If no one volunteers, I will randomly choose someone from the chat, and by next lecture in 2 weeks' time, he will be the person in the bed, leading all of you guys into enlightenment. To be honest, the patient's job is more important than mine. I am just explaining things, so he should be very proud and cherish the fact that he is actually the real teacher.
Still, silence.
Alright then, but I am not happy about that.
He went on.
Let me find someone myself.
He appeared to be searching for something on his monitor.
Username HealthyRaven96 will be with us next lesson, and I will see you all then.
Healthy Raven 96 got instantly disconnected. The others started to log out too, while some stayed to discuss the lesson. I turned off my PC. What had I just watched? This was more like a cult than a classroom. It wasn't natural to use a human guinea pig for teaching. But still, I learned so much. This person talked with so much passion for science and had a strange charisma, you may even call it charm. But no matter, I decided to never open this site again. I was not going to be participating in this illegal situation. I knew how wrong this was, but deep inside me, my everlasting thirst was still demanding more. I broke my promise 2 weeks later. It was the day of the supposed lecture, and I just couldn't take it out of my mind. I logged in for Anatomy 102 once again, and this time, a young woman was on the bed. The process was similar. Dr. Mason introduced himself and started his lesson, this time focused on the nervous system. I was hooked before I even knew it and watched the entire talk without flinching this time. Until the moment that the unlucky girl was dead and I hadn't even moved from my seat. And this became a part of my life. I was following every lecture showing 100% attendance. I watched as men, women, and some rare times even underage people were brought to their untimely death for the sake of science. I started participating actively, asking questions about amputations and tissue damage, and sometimes I was the one who suggested the craziest experiments. I wasn't addicted to the gore in particular, but it was a small price to pay for knowledge. I learned so much, for example, that the pain threshold that we are taught that the human body can withstand is bullshit. I saw with my very own eyes how much the human organism can suffer before giving up for good. That and many other things that are not to be told in this post. The months went by fast and I kept watching the lectures. Some rare times, there was someone inspired so much from the doctor's words that he or she would volunteer for the lesson making, and all of us will sigh in relief. But those times were rare. It was mostly Russian roulette every week. I was scared, of course, but the risk was well worth the reward. At the same time, I studied even harder, completely locking myself out of the real world. I wanted to learn even more now, so much was I inspired by this masked man. Then, a day came which I never expected to come. The doctor had finished the lecture, slowly turning a man's brain into mashed potatoes, and as always, was looking for a volunteer. After the usual awkward silence, I heard something truly terrifying.
Okay then, students. Next to come here with us will be Lotus Eclipse.
My username. My stupid username, made as a pun of my favorite car. I had thought that this might happen, but never actually thought it would. The chances were always pretty low, and I was enjoying the classes way too much to stop. For the first time since that fateful day that I learned about this damn site, I called the only man that could understand me, Jonathan. He picked up the phone and we talked for a long time, and in the end we managed to formulate a solution. We spent the rest of the time until the lecture in my house. We were together all the time in order to succeed what we planned. 3 days before the lesson was to happen, we were attacked while we were in the house. I don't know how they found us, but truth be told, the doctor had never failed to locate his force volunteer. He was with his helper as I had predicted. Jonathan had a flash earlier this week and had bought a gas mask as precaution. I don't know how he foresaw that, but we were prepared for the gas that our stalkers used that night. I guess that's how the doctor managed to get his victims in the operating room in one piece every time. People perhaps were prepared for an assault, but very few had thought of that. I was lucky to have access to a gun, heirloom of my early past father, and managed to shoot the knee of the doctor before he could attack. The helper was not much of this ice-cold man that I had thought of when I watched the live streams. He was very willing to help us with whatever we wanted in exchange for his life. And after I got all the information I wanted, I shot him in the head just to take his annoying whining out of my ears. And here we are today. As I'm typing this, I hear the muffled voice of a man behind me. It was easy to get the codes for the streaming and the doctor's username and password from the crying helper pleading for his life, and so that I could continue the job and the idea he had started. I felt that he had helped me a lot during this time, and it was time for me to help others myself. With Jonathan at my side, we would venture to experiments which no one had ever dared to conduct. We would take science and medicine many steps ahead through our will to try new things. But it just felt right that I would give Dr. Mason a great gift. He always believed that the man in the bed was doing the greater sacrifice, and I wanted him to have this honor for his very last appearance in the classroom. His screams and violent shaking on the bed, though, gave a different suggestion. I guess he wasn't such a believer and a pioneer as he always thought. But no matter. The time is now for someone to take his place. Someone with vision, skills, and the cunningness. Someone like me to continue his work. So friends, I invite you all to join us. We will learn together and find answers to all the questions we still have for the human body, so that in time, we can have a perfect knowledge of medicine and its practices. Come to the stream and be part of the class as we will examine all that there is to the human organism. And feel free to ask any questions you like. My helper and I will be happy to answer them or show some real-life examples to help you understand better. Now, if you'll excuse me, the lesson is about to start. I have planned a very special lecture as a parting gift for Dr. Mason. I will see you all in class.
Don't Do Jobs Off the Deep Web. Story by U/Crispy Christopher. This all started a week ago when I lost my job and was running behind on bills. I lived in a simple house, and that job was all that held my life together. After a night of drinking and watching TV, I started looking for a new job. Most of them looked boring, just 9-to-5 office jobs, but one caught my eye. It was an ad on the side of the screen that read, "High-paying jobs for hire. This isn't just your normal 9-to-5 job." In desperation, I clicked on the shady ad. Slowly but surely, a new website loads, with multiple links to different jobs with different descriptions. Deep web jobs. House sitting, $100 per shift. Stay in a camera room. Watch all the rooms. Keep the house safe. Rules in link. Seems easy, I thought to myself. God, do I regret that. Crop harvest, $150 per field. Harvest a field of corn. Tools are provided. Rules in link. Reading down all the jobs. The house sitting seemed the easiest, so I clicked on the link, eager for the $100. On the screen, a sign-up sheet popped up, asking for my email. I typed it in quickly and was met with a message. We hope to see you soon. Satisfied with that, I hopped in bed and turned off the lights. I start to drift off when I hear a buzz from my phone. Irritated, I get up and check my phone. A new email? I thought to myself. I clicked on the notification. Your application has been accepted. Thank you for applying to the house sitting job. You will stay at the house from 12 a.m. until 4 a.m., and you must follow these rules. Your money will arrive at 6 a.m. after your shift. Always, no matter what you hear or see, stay in the camera room. Either don't bring your phone, or if you do not turn it on, even if you get a notification. I will not email you during your shift. Make sure to bring something that can play music fairly loudly. Arrive at 12 or a little before 12. If you arrive past 12, do not enter the house and send me an email. From 12 to 1, you're allowed to roam the house, but make sure to be in the upstairs camera room by 1. Turn all the lights off, lock the doors, and close the blinds. From 1 until 2, watch the cameras. If you see a man in the living room watching TV, turn that camera off until you hear the TV turn off from downstairs. Ignore any sounds that you hear around the house. If you feel anything touch you, stop moving and close your eyes until the feeling goes away. From 2 until 3, open the blinds in the camera room. If you hear a voice from the window, do not look at them. The conversation will be normal, and once they say goodbye, it's safe to close the blinds. This event can happen any time in the hour. If you see a woman cooking in the kitchen, you have a blue button on your desk that turns on a loud sound in the kitchen. Press and hold that button until the woman disappears. From 3 until 3:33, turn on your music device as loud as possible. Cover your ears, close your eyes, and ignore any sounds or movement around you. If the music stops, make any sound of your own to drown out what's happening around you. After 3:33, you are allowed to roam the house until 4. Do not leave before 4, and do not leave more than 5 minutes after 4. If any rules are not completed correctly, hide under the desk and do not move until 4. That is all. Your shift starts tomorrow night at 471 Pedersen Drive. Sincerely, Mr. Salazar. I must have read that email 10 times over, thinking this was a prank or something. No way do I actually have to follow these crazy rules, I thought to myself, entranced at how specific the rules were. I put my phone back down to charge and went to sleep, still confused by the email. All I could do the next day was think about what the email said. Man in the living room, woman in the kitchen, conversation with a person in the window. It all seemed too crazy to be true, but I couldn't help but find myself 15 minutes before 12 with an old iPod in my pocket, standing at 471 Pedersen Drive. I entered the house. It had a sort of old but still livable vibe to it. The house was dusty, but the kitchen and living room were spotless. I made my way upstairs, and at the end of a long hallway stood the camera room. It was barren and small, with nothing but a chair, a camera monitor, and a couple of windows in it. I sat down in the chair. Man, I hope this is worth it. It wasn't. Looking at the computer's clock, it's 12:03. I have 1 hour to look around the house. First, I head back to the living room, close the blinds, lock the doors, and turn the lights off. Repeat that for all of the rooms, and at 12:56 I was back to the camera room. As soon as it hit 1, I felt a sudden dread, telling me to get up and leave right now. I turned on all the cameras, and on the back of my neck, it felt as if a feather was resting on it. I froze. Keep calm, Chris, keep calm. I closed my eyes as I remembered the rules. It felt like hours, that feather tickling the back of my neck, but I held out, not moving and keeping my eyes closed. The feather went away. I opened my eyes, relieved, and heard behind me slow, coordinated footsteps. I whipped around. The footsteps went away, and a slow chuckle came from the camera speaker. The man was watching TV. The TV was lit up with some cooking show, and the man was chuckling while watching the show. I turned that camera off and hoped I'd done it fast enough. The sound from the TV echoed up the stairs, chilling me to the bone. What the hell is this place? I thought to myself, feeling queasy. And how is it only 1:20? The next 20 minutes were creepy as can be. Unknown sounds bouncing around the house, the man laughing at the TV, watching all the cameras, until the silence hit me hard. The TV had been turned off, and dread had fell upon me once again. The noise from the TV had been a constant for the past 20 minutes, but now that it was off, the silence felt threatening. I slowly turned on the camera and found the room to be empty. I sighed in relief. For what felt like an eternity, my eyes darted around the cameras, on edge, until the clock made a quiet beep, and it turned 2 a.m. I rose from my chair and opened the blinds, revealing the pitch-black lawn outside. I sat back down as the clanging of pots and pans ringed in my ears. I looked down at the blue button beside the monitor, then at the lady, now cooking black eggs in the kitchen, and I was about to press the button. "Hi, Chris." A woman's voice came from the window. I froze, gluing my eyes to the monitor, forcing myself not to look at the window. "Hi, how was your day?" My voice was shaky. It was obvious that I was scared. "I was just strolling around the neighborhood. Saw you were here and I just wanted to say hi." The window she was talking to me through was high enough up off the ground to need a large ladder to get to. "How was your day?" "My day was fine, thanks." The woman in the kitchen started to get louder. "Okay, well, I have to go. It was nice to meet you." "It was nice to meet you too." "Bye." I wanted to get up. I wanted to just close the blinds and never hear her voice again. But something just told me that I should not get up. "Wow, you're a smart one. I thought that would get you. Maybe next time. Goodbye." I waited a few seconds, The last thing I want to see was the face of that lady talking to me. So I waited until I was sure she wasn't there anymore, then closed the blinds. Once that ordeal was over, I realized that the lady in the kitchen was gone, even though I never pressed the button. Oh no, 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 I thought. I'd broken one of the rules, and it was only 2:30. Now, I'm sitting under the desk, typing this out on my iPod. And there's a lady with a ragged apron on, walking in circles around the room. I'm scared to make any noise, so please, if you see an ad for dark web jobs, don't click it. Update. It's 4:30 now. I made it out of the house and I'm safe. My left leg is hurt a little, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened. The lady from the kitchen walked around the room, making soft groans and drooling everywhere. I kept as silent as I could. Freezing time, she turned in my direction. A small beep came from on the desk, notifying me that it had turned 3. The lady in my room melted into the floorboards, screaming a scream of the utmost agony and pain. What I was supposed to do at this point was turn on the music on my iPod, close my eyes and cover my ears, but hiding under the desk, I didn't know if I still had to do that. I waited and waited, and silence was all I could find, until the walls and the floors of the house started to contort. The house shifted and moved into what looked like faces popping out of the walls. The only description of the sound I can think of is a scream of terror itself. I couldn't take it anymore. My mind told me to get up, to run, to get out as fast as I could. But I knew I couldn't. I closed my eyes and turned the music on. The screams were drowned out, and it seemed almost calming. But in the back of my mind, I knew what was happening around me. The music blared loudly. My eyes stayed glued shut. Then the music turned off. I opened my eyes, and the house was normal again. Shakily, I stood up and looked at the clock. 3:34. I got back under the desk and lay there, terrified. But nothing happened. I was sitting there for 35 minutes until the final beep from the clock came, telling me I could finally leave. I got up, walked down the hallway, down the stairs to the front door, and finally, the sweet, cool air of the night hit my face, and in that moment, I felt a relief that was almost euphoric. I walked home and picked up my phone, but when I went to email Mr. Salazar, his email was gone. The website was gone. There was no trace of him at all. I tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't get the faces out of my head. The look they had can't be explained. I don't know if I'm going to get my money, but at this point, I don't care. I just want to never go back to that house again. Update. It's 6 o'clock now. A package somehow appeared at my door, and inside was $80 and a letter. The letter is as follows. You can't escape. Hello again, Chris. I see that you showed up for your shift this morning. I appreciate that. But during your shift, you broke one of the rules. I'm pretty sure you're already aware, but I can tell you don't want to go back. Most people don't. And I'm here to say you can't escape. By entering that house, you pretty much signed your soul away. No matter what you do, you'll always be at that house by 12. That is all. Sincerely, Mr. Salazar. My sleep last night was horrible. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened on my first shift. The whole day, I stayed in bed, terrified for midnight to come. But it had to come eventually. 11:57, I begged that nothing would happen to me. 11:58, I put my iPod in the trash. 11:59, I lay in bed and close my eyes. I feel pressure on my feet, and my soft bed disappears from under me. I open my eyes and find myself inside that cursed house again, with my iPod and a printed paper of the rules in my hands. What? How is this possible? I think to myself. I ran to the door, slamming my fists against it, wanting any way out, but to no avail. I couldn't leave. I defeatedly walked up the stairs and sat in the camera room chair. I sat there, crying for an hour, until 1 o'clock came. And with it came the man laughing at the TV. I turned the camera off and continued to sob, not caring about the sounds around me. But then I felt a hand wrap around my neck. I froze, closed my eyes, tried to control myself. The grip closed tighter and tighter until I could barely breathe. Then it finally left me alone. I gasped for air and grabbed the printed paper of rules given to me at the start of my shift. I looked at the printed sheet of rules, and at the bottom was a handwritten message from Mr. Salazar himself. Good luck. I looked back up at the cameras and composed myself. Okay, Chris, you can do this. You've already been here once. Pull it together. I listened. Not hearing the TV anymore, I turned the camera on, and the clock let out a small beep. It had turned 2 o'clock. I pushed up to open the blinds, but hesitated. Did I really want to talk to her again? Regardless, I pushed the thought away and opened the blinds to be met with a face that only insane people would call a woman. It looked as if she hadn't eaten once in her life. Her skin looked like it was airtight to her bones. She had no meat on her body. Her smile was literally ear to ear. Parts of her skin sagged down at least 2 feet, and her eye sockets had large, black, bloodshot eyes with tiny, beady yellow pupils. Hello again, Chris. I closed the blinds as quickly as I could, and I went to hide under the desk. But the desk is just a block, no space to hide under. I don't know what to do. I hear slow footsteps coming up the stairs. Oh God. The doorknob is turning. The door is locked. Oh, thank God I remembered to lock it. She's screeching from behind the door. She's slamming her hands on it. It's only a matter of time until she breaks the whole door down. What do I do?
Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.